Good afternoon and welcome to yet another episode of Mr. Long Island's Search for Truth and Beauty. My name is Michael Watt, aka Mr. Long Island, and our guest this week is Valerie Pfundstein. Valerie is the author of a book called Veterans, Heroes in Our Neighborhood, and it's a children's book basically that helps helps children understand who the real heroes are in their neighborhood, in their homes, and in their where they live. Valerie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And as you know, the purpose of Mr. Long Island's Search for Truth and Beauty is to discuss issues that need to be discussed on Long Island to help maintain Long Island's vitality. And the beauty is things that make Long Island such a special place to live and work and play. And this week we have a combination of both. The whole hero concept, it's a word that gets tossed around quite a bit. This book addresses that. We're going to get to that. And it's going to serve a purpose for the next generation of Long Islanders and Americans. So we're very grateful to you for writing it. But as we start off every week, we discuss pizza. And the reason for that is Long Island's a very diverse region. But the one thing that every town on Long Island has in common, it has at least one pizza place. And Long Islanders will drive past several pizza places to get to a really good one if they know where they can get really good pizza. So what's your favorite pizza place?
Our favorite pizza place is Pizza Boss in Deer Park. It's near my home, and that's something to say that I like this pizzeria because we're from Brooklyn.
Okay.
So it's a pretty good pizzeria.
It's Pizza Boss and it's on Grand Boulevard in Deer Park?
On Grand Boulevard in Deer Park. Check it out.
What is it that makes it so special?
What makes it special? It tastes just like Brooklyn.
Okay.
If you need a Brooklyn pizza, you're going to Pizza Boss.
I am legally obligated to remind you that Brooklyn is on Long Island, but we're not allowed to say that to Brooklynites. My son lives in Brooklyn and he's not on Long Island. So anyway, you wrote a book. It's called Veterans. I'll even put it up. Veterans in Our Neighborhood. And it's a children's book designed, well, you tell us, what is it about, how did it come about, and what are we doing here?
Well, how it came about is a friend of mine, Manny Jimenez, is a Marine, and he's a Purple Heart veteran. He lost his arm in Afghanistan, he lost his hearing as well, and he came to my kindergarten classroom to read. And I wanted to give him something to read that was pertaining to him. Firefighters come in, they read firefighters' books. Policemen come in, they read police officer books. There was nothing for him to read that was about veterans.
Really?
So he read an ABC book, which was terrific, but it wasn't about him. So I promised him that I would write a story. So the next time he came into a children's classroom, he'd be able to read about himself. I wrote the story, a publisher happened to like it, and found out about it, and offered to publish it.
I didn't realize you teach kindergarten. How long have you been teaching kindergarten?
I was a teacher in kindergarten for a few years, about 5 years, and now I travel to schools with my book. Wow. And I speak to children about the importance of writing veteran stories, which is a passion of mine.
So you were teaching for a while, and to your knowledge, there was no children's books that would help explain what a veteran is?
There aren't any still except for mine.
Wow.
And it was very exciting because you feel like you're really making a difference in someone's life when you share with children the idea that these men and women walk in their community every single day, and they have no idea, the kids have no idea what they've done to protect them, to protect our communities. And now they're very humbly serving in our communities. Well,
and it puts a human element, a human story behind. I mean, honestly, what most kids think about with war is, video games. And it's you push the button and things happen.
Absolutely. And, some of their stories are like video games. Some of their stories are exciting and are some are violent. Some are just that are adrenaline rushes that they like to share. But more importantly, it's important to remember that these veterans don't come out on their own to share their stories. They're very, very humble. And that's something that a hero is that no other type of personality is. I mean, you look at sports athletes, they're heroes in their own way, but they're not really humble and they're not going out there to protect our boys and girls in our country.
Well, and I think the really important lesson when you're discussing veterans specifically, and all veterans are heroes because they give of themselves and their lives and time to save, protect this country. But it's democracy doesn't happen by accident. It's the sacrifice that these men and women make. Even just the grunt soldiers, it's tremendous amount of time away from their families and putting themselves at risk.
Yeah, there are many sacrifices they make. As a matter of fact, Manny is a Purple Heart. He lost his arm and his hearing in Afghanistan, and he came home and swims in the Veteran Olympics, and you wouldn't even know it, that he's done so much for our country because he's so humble. As a matter of fact, if you ask him how it feels to have lost his arm, he says he gave his arm and he would want to do it again.
Wow.
Because he loves our country. And the boys and girls really need to know this. And they really need to know that it's not just my friends that are heroes. It's their friends and their family members that don't ordinarily are outspoken to say, let me tell you about what I've done for you and our country. It's important for the kids to go out and find the veterans and ask them to tell them stories.
Well, it's interesting. Now, my sons, my dad served in Korea. He unfortunately was gone before they were old enough to really hear any stories. My wife's father served in World War II, but he never really talked about what he did until a couple of years prior to his passing. He was interviewed by a Coast Guard magazine, and he served in the Coast Guard, and the stories he told were captivating. And it's amazing that these heroes, these veterans, really endure what they did and what they went through, and yet they don't feel, unless you ask them, they're not going to tell you the story.
That's exactly the point I make to the kids. And I tell the kids, ask for a story, and I assure the kids the first thing they're going to hear from the veteran is, you don't really want to know my story. That's the first thing they're going to say, but that's them being humble. And I tell the kids to persist and tell them, as a matter of fact, you know that begging game they play for video games?
Right.
Please, Mom, I need to know the story is the same thing. So it's Grandma, Grandpa, I need to hear the story. I want to hear your story. And then you will hear the story.
Now, does your book, walk us through what's in the book. What can a parent expect if they get a copy of this book?
It's a rhyming picture book.
Okay.
So it addresses, even at a very young age, the men and women who serve in the community that the children already know. And to just bring their awareness that these are men and women who did serve our country many years ago. And even though it was quite a few years ago that they served, they still deserve our appreciation and our respect.
And, you touch on the part of the everyday life, so they're not exactly walking around with cape and boots.
I often refer to them as superheroes, and they have a secret identity. That's how the kids know them, by their secret identity. And once the kids realize that, they actually go out and look for veterans. Sometimes they'll recognize them. I encourage them to find them by wearing the baseball caps, and you'll see the campaigns they fought right on their caps. Sometimes they're wearing red poppies. I even tell the kids, those #1 dad shirts that your dad wears? Well, there's no such shirt as a #1 veteran because they wouldn't wear it.
And I would imagine you're not really glorifying war. I mean, that was one of the knocks on World War II, the movies. You make it look seems like such a noble cause. The story, well, you tell me. I mean, how does that work with the young people?
No, it's not to glorify war.
Right.
It's just to raise awareness that there are men and women who have written a blank check to protect our country. Some of the checks were cashed, some of the checks were not. So we need to find all the men and women who are still out there who did serve our country and serve it proudly, and let them know that their service is not forgotten.
Now, when you go to these classrooms, do you bring a veteran with them?
No, I don't. I actually bring posters of veterans.
Okay.
And I share stories about them, starting even with my grandfather who served. I tell them that he was the very first superhero I ever met.
Okay.
He used to tell us stories with his ukulele. He would sit on our stoop in Long Island City and tell us stories. And I always thought that was perfectly normal. But since he was a vaudeville guy, he was used to performing.
Okay.
A lot of veterans aren't. So it's important to go out and ask the veterans their stories. They'll tell you. Sometimes I tell the kids, depending upon the age of the veteran, it seems to me the older the veteran, sometimes if you set the camera up, they'll just start talking and they'll talk for hours.
Right.
And it's great to get those stories.
Do you the veterans in your book? They from all the different wars? Or,
yes, they're all different wars.
Okay.
And every veteran that's named in my story is actually a veteran in my life.
Okay.
My grandfather, Manny, my friends, my neighbor Edna, who is in her 90s and she still shovels her own snow, and she still mows her own lawn, and she still goes to work every day. She also marches in the Veterans Day Parade, and when I say march, she really marches.
Wow.
So these are men and women that are around us every day, and some of the kids recognize them as just the old people in our neighborhood.
Now, at one point, Nassau County had the highest concentration of World War II veterans. I guess it's a manifestation of Levittown and all that. They were really, amazingly, coming down to a dwindling few World War II veterans.
It is becoming an issue, and that's why it's all the more important for the kids to recognize them now. Once they're gone, their stories are gone too.
Now, you go to classrooms on Long Island or around the country?
All over. I've been to Florida, I've gone to New Jersey, in New York City, all over Long Island.
Do the kids understand Long Island's background in defense? Does
They
that
do.
ever come up?
As a matter of fact, I also spend some time at the Cradle of Aviation.
Okay.
And I do explain to the kids the importance of the history of even our plane making on Long Island and all the building of planes that happens here, especially the role that women played.
Right.
And I also tell kids that when you find an older woman that says she did nothing during World War II, ask her what she did during that time instead. Often they'll tell them that they actually worked in the factories building planes.
Yeah.
And if we didn't have those Rosies, we wouldn't have the planes, we wouldn't have won the war.
Yeah.
It's very important to be part of the war effort.
And it really underplayed, under-celebrated, maybe is the right word, role and
Absolutely.
contribution.
There's still one Rosie that's still working.
Wow.
Eleanor Otto, and she's 93 years old, and she's still working. And I think she's going to be retiring this year,
Yeah.
but she's going to be in New York City for the Veterans Day Parade this year.
Yeah, now I know, my mother-in-law and her sisters, they all worked at Sperry and Fairchild, and unfortunately, my mother-in-law passed away a couple of years ago, so you're losing that history.
Absolutely.
And I think it's especially important that the veterans, the sacrifices they make are recognized properly. I mean, I grew up when, the Vietnam War guys were coming by, and sure you had the same experience, and almost the shame you felt, or embarrassed, or just anger.
Well, we were misdirected as a country at that time, I really feel. Of course, not everyone wants to go into different conflicts. You're never going to have that situation. But we have to be able to separate the conflict from the men and women who decided to serve our country.
And I think we have done that. But,
I know we have.
It's trying to, we're watching Born on the 4th of July with my sons. Now, I'm from Massapequa, and Ron Kovic's dad was my Little League coach, So I'm watching a movie, and I was like, boy, it's like really, because I remember there was, in the beginning of the movie, there's a scene with the parade, and I remember that. I was there, and there's Ron Kovic rolling down Broadway. And I felt, you had all these proud World War II veterans, and then there's the Vietnam guy rolling. And I just remember feeling like, what's wrong with my generation? And I think it's almost shameful. It's in a really dark period in the country's history that we didn't treat those veterans better.
Absolutely. And most of them, the ones that I've met anyway, most of them have not dwelled upon that. They've recognized that there have been mistakes made in the past. And that there's always time to just appreciate them now.
Well, I think you're seeing like what the Yankees do before each or during each home game. I think is brilliant. They do it down in Tampa during spring training. It's funny because, as you know, my son plays down there, and I was watching a spring training game, and he called me during the game. He was upset about something that happened on the baseball field. And I said, well, Max, that's pretty good because right now they're honoring somebody with one leg who lost his leg in Iraq. And guess what? He's your age. And that was the end of that conversation, the lesson learned. So I think there's a lot to benefit from what you're doing with the veterans here and telling them story in a very colorful and approachable kind of way. Gets the young people not only to appreciate the sacrifices they make, but also to understand that democracy just doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
Now, tell us a little bit about the writing process. Now, everyone, you often hear people say, I always want to write a children's book like it's just a matter of writing, throwing a couple words on a page.
Yeah. Well,
Tell us about
I wrote
that.
this out of necessity.
Okay.
I wrote this because Manny needed something to read. I never intended to become a children's author. That wasn't my intention, ever.
Even though you were a kindergarten teacher?
Even though I was a kindergarten teacher,
Okay.
I just felt that I was so drawn to this situation that there needed to be a veteran story.
Okay.
So I guess necessity is the mother of invention, and I wrote the story. It's a rhyming story, but it went through such a process to get published. Just because the publisher agreed to take it, it had to be edited, it had to be revised. As a matter of fact, originally, some of the characters in the story, I was being a good mom, some of the characters were named after my children.
Right.
And my editor actually had a dream that the World War II veteran should be named Frank.
Okay.
The irony is my grandfather's name, who served during World War II, was Frank.
Wow, okay.
So then I realized that was a message being sent to me. So I changed all the characters' names to reflect real veterans in my life. And they were all pretty excited to be on board with that.
Wow, that's neat. But the writing process itself is very different. I mean, have you ever written any a
Yes.
novel or anything like that?
Since I haven't written a novel, I write
Okay.
children's books now.
Okay.
But my second book is coming out, and I understand the process of writing from the beginning. The whole meter, I'm a rhyming book. So the whole idea of counting meters and counting pages and making sure there's only a certain amount of syllables, it gets very complicated, but it's exciting.
And you also have to work
Here's something
closely
else.
with an illustrator.
I worked very closely with the illustrator. It was a matter of going back and forth. My second book, I'm even working closely with him too, because now I'm also publishing the second book.
Okay.
So with the second book, actually, the illustrator is a New York City firefighter. So
And
of
the
course,
second book is about firefighters.
it's about firefighters.
Okay.
It's actually called Lucky Him. And I don't know if you know a firefighter, but firefighters always have second jobs.
I'm an Irish Catholic.
There you
I have
go.
to, how many
Yeah.
firefighters are in my
Absolutely.
family, right?
And the firefighters always have second jobs, and the only
Right.
drawback to having a firefighter doing something besides firefighting is it might take forever. So my illustrator's taking, he's being very careful about what he's doing because he knows it's a reflection on his job. It's a reflection on him being a firefighter to get this right.
Where are you at with that now? How close are
With
you to the
that,
finish line? Yeah.
well, we have our song already written.
Okay.
So the song is being, as a matter of fact, Joe Gaida, who is the skiing bus driver on Long Island,
Okay.
he's actually wrote the song to accompany my book, and Joseph Fisher is actually the illustrator, and they're working together. And my illustrator's almost done.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I just spoke to him today. He's almost finished with the work. So once it's finished, it should take a few weeks to get it into publication, and we're really excited.
And do you plan on creating a series of these kinds of books, or?
No, well, right now I don't.
Okay.
Because I have a third project also in the pipe there. We have a project to train teachers in schools about how to deal with children in the military.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
People don't realize that when someone goes to serve in our military, that their children are actually serving too.
Wow.
The children have their own unique issues that schools need to be ready to address. And often they're not, because again, the veterans and military men and women are all very humble.
Right.
They don't brag that they're leaving for military duty and they're being deployed. So the children are left kind of holding the bag, that maybe they act out in school, maybe their grades suffer, and the teachers in schools need to be able to address these things.
Wow. That's, honestly, that's something I never would have thought about. Yeah, I would imagine, especially, just having an absentee parent for whatever reason.
Yeah, things you wouldn't even think. I mean,
Right.
even if there's going to be a bake sale and mom is now deployed,
Right.
To think that maybe grandma and grandpa, whoever's watching the child, is not prepared to do that.
Or even just the anxiety of knowing that your mom or dad is in harm's way.
Absolutely.
Wow. So the book is Veterans, Heroes in Our Neighborhoods. Came out of necessity, had a veteran approach your kindergarten class.
Yes.
You had nothing for, which I mean, God bless you. I can't believe that, but, you're doing a great thing here. And you got a subsequent book, and how do you get that out to the public? How does the world know about these
Well,
things?
I do have a website. It's
Okay.
www.valeriepfundstein.webs.com. You can go to my website. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. You can just search for me.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, soon you might be able to see me a little easier. A major publishing company actually is picking up the book
Wow.
to be part of their reading program for first graders.
Good for you, good for the country.
Yes,
Really
yes.
get that instilled in them in an early age that, they're all men and women making sacrifices for the country.
Absolutely.
and
I
their
stand on their
stories are-
shoulders.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's tremendous. This is a tremendous service, Valerie. Thank you so much for
Thank you
doing
for
this and for
having me.
spending some time with us this afternoon. And good luck with the book and the firefighters book and the program with the young kids. That's good stuff. That's truth and beauty.
And if I could even say, if
yeah, sure.
if there's anyone in the military that's considering participating in we have a research going on for the Kids Who Serve is actually the name of the program. You can
Okay.
Google up Kids Who Serve and actually take a survey. It's 10 questions to just help us address the needs that we
Terrific.
need to address in our program.
That's wonderful. Good luck with the book.
Thank
and, when the firefighter one comes out, feel free to come by and we'll talk about that some more.
I
So,
will.
all right, our guest this afternoon has been Valerie Pfundstein, the author of Veterans, Heroes in Our Neighborhoods. And it's a terrific thing that she's doing not only for Long Island, but for the rest of the country. And thank you very much, Valerie. This has been another episode of Mr. Long Island's Search for Truth and Beauty. My name is Michael Watt, a.k.a. Mr. Long Island, and thank you for joining us today.